For 18 years, I lived with the weight of a single, unsolved case. In my 25-year career at the FBI, I'd handled gruesome homicides, international conspiracies, and chilling kidnappings, but none stayed with me like Ashbourne Grove. It began on a crisp October morning in 2007, a day as ordinary as any other in that small, picturesque town. Emily Crawford, an 8-year-old girl with curly auburn hair and a wide smile, woke up at 6:30 a.m. like she did every weekday. She brushed her teeth, put on her navy blue school uniform, and sat down for breakfast with her parents. Her dad, a banker, hurriedly kissed her forehead on his way out the door. Her mom, Meredith, packed her lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, and an apple. Emily walked to school that day, her backpack bouncing as she chatted with her best friend, Lily. They were inseparable, always walking home together, always swapping stories about boys, teachers, and their shared dream of becoming veterinarians. It was a perfectly normal day. Until it wasn't. Emily didn't come home that afternoon. Her teacher confirmed she had been at school all day, right up until dismissal. Lily said goodbye to her at their usual spot outside the school gate, but Emily never made it home. Her mother called the school, then her father, then the police. By nightfall, the entire town was searching for her. There was no sign of Emily. At first, it seemed like a classic abduction, a stranger in a van, a predator lying in wait. But there was no evidence, no witnesses, no security footage, no disturbances along Emily's route home. Her belongings were untouched. Even the streets themselves, usually brimming with cars and pedestrians, seemed unusually quiet that day. The only clue was a Polaroid photo that arrived at the Crawford home 3 days later. It showed Emily sitting on a park bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked calm, almost serene. But what chilled us was the figure standing behind her. It was blurred, like a smudge on the lens, but something about its shape was deeply unsettling. Its height, the way it seemed to loom over Emily without casting a shadow, it was wrong in a way we couldn't articulate. We analyzed the photo every which way. We interviewed every neighbor, friend, and teacher. We even scoured Ashbourne Grove's quiet streets and surrounding woods for weeks, but nothing surfaced. Emily was gone, and so was her captor. Life in Ashbourne Grove changed forever after Emily's disappearance. Parents clung tighter to their children. The once bustling parks and streets grew eerily empty. Rumors spread, stories of a watcher who had stalked the town for decades, always waiting, always watching. And then, just like that, the case went cold. I tried to let it go. I buried myself in other cases, chasing leads across the country. But something about Emily's face, her smile in that photo, haunted me. She became the face of my failure, the case that I could never solve. 18 years later, I was no longer the young, sharp-eyed agent I'd been when I first took the case. I was months away from retirement, coasting through paperwork and counting down the days. Then, the tip came in. It was from a woman named Lily, Emily's best friend, now an adult and a mother herself. She claimed she'd found something while cleaning out her late grandmother's attic, a notebook Emily had given her just days before she disappeared. The notebook wasn't remarkable at first glance, scribbles, doodles, and notes about their school projects. But on the last page, Emily had written something in shaky handwriting. "The man without a face is here. He knows my name. Don't tell anyone, or he'll come for you too." It was the first new lead we'd had in years. As I returned to Ashbourne Grove for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the town hadn't changed much, but it felt hollow. The streets were quieter, the houses more weathered. The woods, however, were as dense and foreboding as ever. Lily led us to a spot deep in the woods, one she claimed she and Emily used to call their secret place. It was an old, overgrown playground, long forgotten by the town, Swings rusted and creaked in the breeze, and a merry-go-round sat lopsided in the dirt. At the base of an oak tree half buried under leaves was a small wooden box. Inside were more Polaroids, each more chilling than the last. They showed Emily in various locations: her school, her church, even her bedroom, always with the blurred figure standing nearby. The timestamps on the photos were recent. The more we dug, the stranger the case became. Locals spoke in hushed tones about a man who had lived on the outskirts of town years ago. He was reclusive, odd, and had disappeared without a trace shortly after Emily did. We traced his last known address to a decrepit house just beyond the woods. Inside, we found an old camera, film reels, and dozens of Polaroids. Some were decades old. All featured children from Ashbourne Grove, some of whom had vanished under mysterious circumstances. But then we found something worse: a hidden room beneath the floorboards. It was a small, windowless space, no bigger than a closet. On the walls were drawings, childlike sketches of the blurred figure, and in the center of the room was a single chair, facing a mirror. The mirror had writing scrawled across it. "Do you see me now?" I moved closer, and the blurred figure in the sketches seemed to shift, watching me. The mirror held faint fingerprints, streaked downward as if someone had clawed at it, desperate to escape their reflection. And then I saw it. In the mirror, a shadow, tall and faceless, loomed behind me, its presence colder than anything I'd felt before. At that moment, I decided that I wouldn't risk my life for something I have not been trained to deal with as well. It was far more than my pay grade to be involved in such a risk. So we had to rush back to the woods. As we returned to the woods one last time, we found her, Emily Crawford, standing alone in the clearing. Her auburn curls caught the soft morning light, and she clutched the same notebook Lily had shown us. It was impossible. She hadn't aged a day. Her wide, glassy eyes darted toward us as we approached, as though she were unsure whether to trust us. But when her mother, Meredith, stepped forward, Emily's tense shoulders relaxed. "Mom," Emily whispered, her voice trembling, tears streaking her face. Meredith ran toward her, her arms outstretched. "Emily, oh, my baby," she sobbed, dropping to her knees. Emily collapsed into her embrace, her small frame trembling. For a fleeting moment, it was beautiful, a family reunited. But then Emily whispered something that shattered everything. "Why did you let him take me?" The words were barely audible, but they hit like a thunderclap. Meredith froze. Her grip on Emily tightened for a fraction of a second before she let her go. She looked up at me, her face pale, her expression unreadable. "Emily," she said softly, her voice wavering, "what are you talking about?" But Emily stepped back, her eyes wide with terror now. "You told him my name. You told him where I'd be. You said it would only hurt for a little while." The air in the clearing turned suffocatingly still. "Meredith," I said, my voice low and deliberate, "what is she talking about?" Meredith shook her head frantically. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's been gone for so long." Her voice cracked, her hands trembling, but Emily wasn't done. She pointed a trembling finger at her mother. "You were crying that night in the kitchen. You said you needed to do it. You said it would save us, save Dad, save the family. You promised you wouldn't let him hurt me too much." My chest tightened as I watched Meredith crumble. Her sobs grew ragged, her hands covering her face. "It was the only way," she finally screamed, her voice splitting the silence. "He said he'd destroy us, your father, everything. I didn't know he would take you. I thought—" "You thought I wouldn't remember," Emily interrupted, her voice cold now. Meredith's breakdown wasn't an act. She was unraveling before my eyes, but there was a darkness to her desperation, a weight of guilt so profound it pulled the entire clearing into its orbit. We learned the horrifying truth later, piecing it together from Meredith's fractured confession. 18 years ago, Meredith had been drowning in debt. The family's perfect life, the house, the cars, the private school for Emily, was a facade. They were weeks away from losing everything. That was when she'd met him. He came to her late one night, a shadow at her door. He didn't look human, not entirely, but his words slithered into her mind like smoke. He promised her salvation, financial freedom, a clean slate, a life of comfort. The price? Her daughter. Meredith thought it was a cruel joke at first, a delusion brought on by her desperation. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. Unexplained movements in the house, Emily talking about the man without a face watching her from her bedroom window. In her panic, Meredith struck a deal. She gave him Emily's name and promised to ensure she was alone in the woods the day she disappeared. She justified it to herself. Emily was young, resilient. She wouldn't remember. But she was wrong. Emily stood motionless, her small frame now seeming larger, darker, as though the years she had lost were rushing back to her all at once. Her gaze was fixed on her mother, who still lay on the ground, trembling, consumed by her own screams. "You sold me," Emily whispered again, but this time there was no pain in her voice, only finality. Her mother looked up, her face streaked with tears, desperation etched into every line. "Please, Emily," she begged. "You can come back now. I can make this right. We can start over." Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Start over?" she repeated, almost mockingly. "You mean step back into a world that forgot me? Into a life where I don't belong? You built a world without me, Mom. And now you want me to fit into it?" Meredith sobbed harder, clawing at the dirt as if to drag herself closer to her daughter. "You're my child, my Emily. Please don't leave me again." Emily's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a faint, bitter smile crossed her face. She turned toward me, her voice calm but chilling. "Do you know what it feels like to be erased? To wake up and realize that the world kept spinning, that you were nothing but a shadow in their memory?" I couldn't answer. The weight of her words pinned me to the spot. Emily stepped back into the clearing, her small hand clutching the notebook tighter. The trees seemed to close in around her, the shadows lengthening unnaturally, as if welcoming her. She looked over her shoulder one last time, her gaze shifting between her mother and me. "I've seen the truth," she said softly. "There's no place for me out there anymore. But here, I have a purpose." Her voice dropped and the smile faded. "People like her," she gestured toward her mother, "they think they can trade pieces of their soul for comfort, for power. They think their betrayal will disappear, just like I was supposed to." Her tone sharpened, cold and resolute. "But someone needs to make them feel what I felt." Meredith's cries grew louder, a broken, incoherent mix of guilt and terror. But Emily ignored her. She stepped deeper into the clearing, her figure blending with the shadows. "You'll stay here?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Emily stopped and turned to me, her face now serene, almost peaceful. "Yes, but I won't be alone. People like her will always find their way to me. The ones who betray, who destroy their own, I'll make them remember. I'll feed them what they fed me, guilt, regret, and fear. Let them choke on it." Her words sent a chill through me. Meredith let out one final, anguished scream as the shadows surged forward, enveloping her completely. When they receded, she was gone. No trace left behind but the eerie silence of the woods. Emily turned, now fully consumed by the darkness of the place that had claimed her for so long. "Go back to your world," she said to me, her voice calm but carrying an edge of warning. "You don't belong here." And just like that, she disappeared into the forest, leaving me standing alone in the clearing, haunted by what I had witnessed. I returned to a world that had moved on without her, but the memory of that day never left me. Emily had chosen to stay behind, to become something more than human, a force of reckoning for those who betrayed their own. Sometimes I wonder if it was justice or vengeance that kept her there, but I know one thing for sure. The woods have never been the same. Every time I pass a parent scolding their child too harshly, every time I hear of a family fractured by betrayal, I think of her. And late at night when I close my eyes, I still hear her voice echoing in my mind. They'll find me, one by one, and I'll be waiting.